Welcome to DOC NYC Spring Showcase. I'm Thom Powers, the festival's artistic director. I'm pleased to host this conversation about the 7-part series, Pretend It's a City, from Netflix. The series is directed by Martin Scorsese, based on a series of conversations with Fran Lebowitz on the subject of New York City. Fran, thank you very much for making the time today.
You're welcome.
Can you start by telling me how you and Martin Scorsese have bonded over the years? You did another project 11 years ago called Public Speaking. Now this is the second. What brings the two of you together so well?
You mean, how did I meet him?
Well, it comes up in the show that you said you can't quite remember how you met, but why is there such a good rapport between the two of you?
It's a mystery. I don't know. I would like to be able to answer that, but I mean, I also really believe that human relationships are mysterious. I mean, they seem not to be because, of course, now, with technology and people have believe they have acquired some sort of scientific method of, putting people together, whether it's for romances or marriages or friendships or whatever. But there's something, mysterious about, why people have, just a kind of connection where it might seem they might not, but I do.
Well, at the end of the last episode, there's a card that dedicates the whole series to the memory of Toni Morrison. And in the series, we see excerpts of you and in conversation with Toni Morrison at the New York Public Library. Can you talk about your friendship with her and what it meant to you?
Oh, my relationship with Toni was central to my life. I mean, it was, and I actually do remember exactly where I met Toni and when I met Toni. And that friendship also was instantaneous. The second we met, we did a reading together that was put together not by us, but by something which it may still exist. There was or is something called the American Academy of Poets. And they had sent me a letter. This was in 1978. It was an actual letter, paper letter, came in the mail. I received it, saying we have this reading series, would you like to read at it? And so I called the guy on the phone and I said, yes, I would like to do it. And he said, well, we always have 2 people reading at each event. And do you know who Toni Morrison is? Because she wasn't that well known then. So I said, yes, I do. He said, do you like her work? I said, I love her work. He said, would you like to read with her? I said, no. That is a ridiculous combination. We have nothing in common. Don't you think that's a bizarre combination? He said, we don't. We think it'd be a good combination. Do you object to it? I said, no. So we did it, and it actually turned out to be a great combination. And after the reading, Toni said, this is a great combination. Let's go on the road, which we didn't do. But we did, a few nights later, have dinner. And so that was, I mean, when Toni died, we had been friends for 40 years.
And what held the two of you together? What would you talk about with Toni Morrison?
Everything. One thing about Toni that people really didn't know, because, and certainly as time went on, she had such a, Toni didn't have fans, Toni had congregants, I mean, Toni was, revered, and Toni, had a very kind of grand public presence. So that people would say, well, what's she like? And I would always say, this is the truth. Toni is really fun. She's really fun. But this was something really not apparent, if you just saw Toni in a public place or if you just read her, So, I mean, she was really fun and we had fun. We talked about everything. I mean, really, it was a very, very close friendship. And we talked about absolutely everything. Toni, a long time ago, when I used to go to the movies all the time, so did Toni. We went to the movies all the time. Toni watched television, all that. This is the thing people didn't know about Toni, is how much television she watched. Toni, who was one of the only wise person I've ever known, and certainly one of the smartest people I've ever known, and certainly a great writer, watched more TV than anyone I've ever known, because she had this policy not to read while she was writing. She thought it was not good for her writing to read. So when she wasn't writing, she watched TV. And I mean, TV, stuff you wouldn't like, couldn't imagine anyone would watch. I don't mean like, great, big time. I mean, like every kind of junk that could be on TV, Toni watched. So I would try to dissuade her from some of this. And in the last year of Toni's life, she was quite sick. I spent a lot of time trying to get her to stop watching the news because I said, Toni, this is killing you. It is killing you. She was watching MSNBC all the time because the country was riveted on the disastrous Trump administration. And Toni was, completely fixated on it. And I said, it's not, we all do this. We're compelled to do this, but it's really bad for your health. But she continued to do it. And so I believe that Donald Trump killed Toni.
Lay it on the list of his sins.
Yeah.
So this project, Pretend It's a City, was filmed before the pandemic, and it's a lot of dwelling about New York City. And I'm wondering how, a year of this pandemic has shaped your opinions about New York City.
Well, my opinion about New York hasn't changed. New York has changed. My opinion about New York is, that, it's New York. I don't care what you say, it's New York. And that's it. This is New York. Okay. So is New York going to change? Yes. New York is always changing. That's one of the things that makes it New York. Is it going to change, more dramatically because of the pandemic? Of course. So is everywhere, by the way, not just New York. And everywhere else that's also going to change is going to not be New York. So what's going to happen in the future? I do not know, because if I knew the future, I would not be here. I would be at my villa in Tuscany because I would have chosen the right lottery number, which I never do. So, but I certainly do not think and never thought, even at the height of the pandemic, New York is over. To me, it's just an incredibly idiotic statement. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's interesting, the locations that you and Martin Scorsese chose for this film: the Players Club, New York Public Library, Grand Central Station, Argosy Books, all of them that evoke, kind of grander old New York that is actually harder to find. I think of some young person outside the city who watches this series and comes to New York looking for that milieu, and it's going to take them some effort to find it.
Good. That's fine with me. I mean, Marty chose the locations, not me. The only location I chose, by which I mean I suggested to Marty, was that diorama of New York City, or whatever. It's not a diorama, but that kind of miniature in New York. That's it, at the Queens Museum. And I also suggested those things that are in the sidewalk because Marty never noticed them. But other than that, Marty chose the Players Club. He chose the library. And in fact, when we were on the way to the library, I said to Marty, I don't really understand your idea for the library. What's your idea about the library? And he said, I don't really have an idea. And of course, I knew that wasn't true, but he must have thought, I'm not going to really tell her. So we'll just see what happens. And so, obviously, Marty is not just a director, he's a great director, but I'm not even a bad one. I'm not a director at all. So I, like at a certain point, because Marty spends much, much more time editing than shooting. So, the shooting is like 1 day to 8 million editing days. So, at a certain point I was watching some of it. And when we go into there's a part of the library that we went into in the series. I forget what it's called, but it's like the genealogy department, which I never knew existed. And when I first saw it, there's the 2 doors that you enter to get into that room, and they have these round windows. And when we got there, I looked through the window, and Marty did. He was standing next to me. So when I first saw it, I saw a shot of us with our faces in these little round windows. I said, look at that, isn't that lucky? Isn't this a great shot? And he looked at me like, lucky? It's lucky. Of course, I never see the camera. It's not that it's hidden. I never pay attention to it. It never interests me. It doesn't bother me. It's a machine. I don't care about machines. So of course I didn't realize that if Marty was saying to me, let's walk down the hall. We're going to walk down the hall now. We're going to look in the window. That Marty had a camera on the other side. Someone was using a camera on the other side. I never thought about it. And in fact, with Toni, I did something with Toni that was in public speaking, the documentary feature he made with me. And it was just me and Toni on the stage at the Directors Guild. And when it was over, Toni said, "Oh boy, didn't those cameras drive you crazy?" And I said, "What cameras?" I didn't even notice them. And Marty had 5 cameras. And, there were 5 people on the stage running around, whatever. And I just don't pay attention to them, And Toni was very annoyed by it, but it didn't bother me. And I just never, like when we're making public speaking, Marty said to me, "I hope you realize," this is after we shot it, "that I told the crew not to laugh because I don't want laughs on the film. I want it to come from the audience." So I said, "What crew? What are you talking about?" He said, "Did you not notice all the people kneeling around the room with the cameras and stuff?" I said, "Not really. I didn't really notice because I know that all that stuff has nothing to do with me. So I don't have to think about it, and that's someone else's job. I'm not thinking about it. To me, that's like, there must be some scientist in charge of that because that cannot be something I'm in charge of." So it doesn't bother me because I don't pay attention to it. And I don't have the same, obviously, mind that Marty has. I don't think in these terms. I don't look at something and think that would be a great shot. I just don't. It doesn't come to me, the same way that I'm not a composer. Music doesn't come into my mind.
So do you watch the series when it's done? Do you enjoy watching yourself in a film?
I hate it. I hate it. And I've never seen this on Netflix, but I've seen it, 5 billion times in 5 billion different forms, because he spent like 2 years editing this, Pretend It's a City. So I kept seeing it over and over again in different forms. I cannot stand to watch myself, and I never could, not even when I was young. So a lot of people my age, they don't want to see themselves, but I never did. I also, I can't stand listening to myself. I also don't want to hear what I am saying because I already know what I said because I said it. No, I do not enjoy it. I know that there are actors who watch themselves. They watch the movies they made and stuff. I don't know how you could do that. I mean, even if you look like a movie star, what difference does it make? You still have to watch yourself.
But you did watch it. Were you watching it for the purpose of giving creative feedback or just making sure that something wasn't horrible about it?
No, I actually had contractually the ability to have an opinion about these things, so that, I mean, and sometimes I would say I didn't like something, but when I saw it when it's being edited, I saw it in pieces, and then when, then when Marty said it was finished, I saw the whole thing through, I think, twice, but I've never seen it on Netflix. So and of course, we made it way before the virus. I mean, shot it. They edited it partially before and then partially during. And Marty was concerned because New York was so different after the virus. But Marty had not seen New York because Marty did not leave his house for like, I don't know, 8 months. I mean, did not put his foot out the door from whenever March 12th, 2019 until, months later. So I was out all the time, just walking around the empty city, because it was so shocking to see. So Marty sent Ellen Kurras, who's the cinematographer, out during the lockdown to film, and then, so he could see it. And Marty said, "What do you think of this?" I illegally went to Marty's office, which you weren't allowed to go to because it was closed, but Marty wasn't there. He was at his house, and someone else illegally met me there, although we stayed thousands of miles away from each other. So I could watch it because I don't have any of this, these computers that you can watch it on. So Marty said, "What did you think?" And I said, it's beautiful because she's a great cinematographer, so the footage is beautiful. You never saw New York like this, Marty, but it doesn't look like this now. So already like 2 weeks later, it already looked different. I said, I think we should do nothing. We're not journalists. It's not our job to keep up to date on the news. I think we should ignore it. I don't think we should, that you should put something, a date in, to say this is before the virus. Anyone in the world can see this is before the virus. And I just think we should skip it. The virus is not our fault. Even I was not blamed for it. And I'm blamed for many things. So the virus is not our fault. We have nothing to do with it. And just, just show it the way that it was meant to be shown. And people can figure out that it was before the virus.
New York has a primary election for their mayor coming up in a little over than a month. I'm curious what you're looking for in a new mayor.
Well, the main thing I'm looking for is not Andrew Yang. This is, this is the kind of thing that makes me lose faith in New Yorkers. Like, if Andrew Yang was happening, like in Portland or something, I think, well, but I mean, are you kidding me? There's no more reason for Andrew Yang to be the mayor of New York City than there is for me to win the Super Bowl. Okay? I mean, zero. There is zero reason he should be the mayor of New York. It's absurd. It's not even funny. It's not even a good joke. It's just totally ridiculous, So I know, or at least, up until, when I came in here, I'm at Netflix. I came in here, I think around noon or something. Up until then, he was still leading in the polls, I think, Andrew Yang. Perhaps by now he's not. But I don't believe he's going to win, and I certainly hope he's not going to win. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And the reason he's leading in the polls is because he has the most name recognition because he ran for president. He ran for president. So he starts out running for president, even though before he ran for president, he had done nothing. The presidency of the United States should be the culmination of a career, not like the first job you have. Not like, I'm not sure what I want to do. Let me be the president until I figure out what a good career for myself would be. So a lot of people thought he was some kind of big tech guy, but apparently he's not. Not that I want a big tech guy to be the mayor of New York, but he's not even a big tech guy. He's not even a tech guy. He's not even a little tech guy. He is no one. By no one, I don't mean he's not a human being deserving of the respect that a human being deserves. I'm saying he has no accomplishments. He is not a lawyer. He's not even a businessman. Not that I want a businessman to be the mayor of New York, but I mean, he doesn't even have any politics as far as I can tell. Someone said to me, well, he has these good ideas. I said, really, what are his ideas? Well, the universal guaranteed income or something like that. I said, first of all, that's not an idea. Okay, that's a notion. Second of all, if that was to be put into effect, that's a federal thing. You can't do that city by city. That's ridiculous. Not that it might be a good idea to have some small amount of money. And believe me, this is a small amount of money. If people think they can live on this, if you think you can live on this in New York, you've never been to New York. So maybe this is a good amount of money to live on in, I don't know, Alabama or something, but it's not a good amount in New York. But that's not an idea. New York, the mayor of New York City is the second hardest job in the country after the presidency. And you see what happens when you have someone unqualified to do that job, which we have now. We now have Bill de Blasio, who is, I don't know how to put this nicely, a moron. And the only good thing about de Blasio is that he's the most uniting figure in American politics because everyone hates him. Everyone hates him. Republicans hate him, Democrats hate him, Black people hate him, white people hate him, men hate him, women hate him, poor people hate him, rich people, everyone hates him. We're united in our hatred of Bill de Blasio. So he does a bad job for everyone, so that he's really unpopular and deservedly so. And I voted for him both times because he's a Democrat, but the first time I voted for him enthusiastically, because the politics he espoused are, I thought, very good politics. The first big thing he did, which was also turns out 8 years later to be the last big thing he did, was the universal pre-K. It's great. It's a great idea. It's a really good thing. It's an important thing. And then it was all downhill after that. And so we have 20 people running. This is always a mistake to have all these people running. We also have something that we've never had before called ranked voting, which is a horrible idea, which I voted against. It was on the ballot. I voted against it. of course, I almost never vote for the thing that wins. So of course it passed. You know, the people, can't say that I really understood the ranked voting. I voted against it because the politicians wanted it. So I thought if they want this, it must be bad.
Um, we now have kind of glimmers of hope of New York City opening up again. And I wonder what are the things that you're most looking forward to as we start to more freely circulate?
Everything. And by the way, I've jumped the gun. As soon as I had both my vaccines, as soon as I was 2 weeks past my second vaccine, I would go anywhere. Okay, so even a friend of mine called me the other day and said, "You are never home. Do you just go out all the time now?" So I called her back. I said, "Yes, I'll go anywhere. I don't even have to be invited. I'm going to go." So I really enjoyed it. And I believe that I'm highly, highly protected by these vaccines. And if I'm wrong, I guess I'll get sick, but it wouldn't be me being wrong. It would be all these scientists who are all much better scientists than me, you know, and much better scientists than the Republican Congress. And so I believe in vaccines. I believe they work. And the idea that people are opposed to vaccines is a shocking thing. It's a really shocking thing to me. And it's not that old. I mean, people started being opposed to vaccines, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. Vaccines for children, but they didn't even have it. The vaccines children now get for like measles and chickenpox and stuff, you know, they didn't have one when I was a child. So I had all these things. Believe me, I'd rather have a vaccine. Anything they would invent a vaccine for, I would get. I'd rather have a vaccine than any illness. So there's no illness that sounds like, oh, I'd rather have the illness. And certainly COVID is such a horrible illness, you know, that I definitely would rather have the vaccine. And then someone said, well, you know, you're going to have one every year. So what? So I'll have one every year. I pay taxes every 3 months. If I can pay taxes every 3 months, I can get a vaccine once a year.
So as we finish up here, I was thinking you invoke your mother several times in this series, and sometimes you're using her to describe the 1950s suburban mindset that you were trying to seek to escape by going to New York. But you clearly have real affection for your mother, and I wonder if you can describe that relationship.
You mean the relationship I had with my mother?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, really? My mother is not alive anymore.
I knew that.
You know, that's not my fault either. I did everything to keep her alive. So, you know, I mean, my mother was that generation of American women. I didn't really understand, truthfully, until I got older. You know, because I think that generation of American women was much more oppressed is quite a strong word, but much more oppressed, if you want to use that word, than the previous generation. Sorry, because it was after the Second World War, you know, and before that, you know, because all the men in the country were were fighting in the war, women had more jobs and more job opportunities. And in fact, we're not just allowed to have jobs, but were encouraged because someone had to make all these things that men weren't making. And of course, you know, this country, they discovered, yes, you know what? It turns out that women can actually make these things because they made all the stuff that we used to win the war. But now that the men are back, oh, you know what? How can a woman make these things? So they took all this stuff away, you know, from women. And, you know, they made this idea of the American family. And I wouldn't say everybody, but like 99% of people try to abide by this. Not just white people, Black people, all people, you know, this was not just the right way to live, but these were the fruits of victory. This is what we have because we won the Second World War. And now we're the most important country in the world. And we saved everybody from the Nazis and, you know, which is true. Thank you. And because of this, you have to stay in the house. You have to take care of the kids. Men of my father was a very lovely man. He was really a lovely man. But my father would no more have done anything in the house than he would have like tried to fly out the window. I mean, after dinner, my father didn't move a muscle. He would never do that. I mean, I once said to him, how come daddy doesn't have to help with the dishes? And my father said, if I wanted to do dishes, I wouldn't have had two daughters. Like, this was not considered a bad thing to say at all. This was just stating the obvious. You know, luckily I had no brothers, because then I would have had to see the brother not also doing the, you know, the dishes. So, and my mother just, I think, got caught in that, and not caught, but I mean, that was the age she was. You know, how old you are is such a defining thing in your life. I don't mean how old you are at this moment, obviously, but, you know, for instance, at Toni Morrison's funeral, a friend of hers who was at the funeral, who's a very radical filmmaker and a very good friend of Toni's, said to me, he was crying. We were crying. It was Toni's funeral. But he said to me, Fran, why was Toni for Joe Biden? He was so upset by this because he's this very radical Black guy. And I said, you know, you never think about people what age they are. To Toni, the age he was, Joe Biden wasn't the guy that he is to young people, wasn't the guy who was horrible to Anita Hill, which is who he was to me, you know, wasn't the guy who promoted this crime bill, you know, this horrible crime bill. But to Toni's generation, he was the guy who pushed back on those Southern senators. You know, I mean, to someone young, not enough. He didn't do enough, you know, but, you know, they can't envision what the Senate was like then, you know, and what the Southern Democrats were like. And he pushed back on them. Did he succeed? No. We still haven't succeeded with those kind of people, you know, so, but Toni remembered that and appreciated that and liked him for that. And, you know, was Toni like less interested, you know, in racial justice? And this guy, of course not, you know, but she had different parameters because she was the age she was. And so I think it would be nice, not that it's going to happen, if when people think about all these things and they think about what people say or think or do, think, what age are they? You know, what is their, how is their sensibility in every way formed much more by the era that you grew up in than it is by anything else.
And how old were you when you could have that perspective on your own mother? Because, you know, lots of times.
Old. I was old. It's so hard to see your parents, I think. You know, it's really hard. I mean, it's maybe less hard now because people have much closer relationship with their parents in the sense of like a more kind of collegial relationship. You know, the distance between children and parents when I was a child was enormous, you know, because, you know, they were in charge and you were not. So, you know, I, for instance, didn't even think of my house as my house. In other words, it was their house. You know, I mean, I lived there, you know, but I never thought the things were mine. You know, they were not mine, they were theirs. You know, how could they have been mine? And we'd ask for everything. We never felt, you know, we'd ask permission for every single thing. You know, I always said, like, this is how I would, and also they were constantly issuing instructions. You know, they thought their job was to make us behave. You know, to take these wild animals that had somehow come into the house and make them behave, to civilize them. And so there was, from morning to night instructions, every kind of thing, manners, grammar, you know, these things were like paramount. So I would say, here's what my childhood was like. I would say to my mother, can I please have an apple? And my mother would say, may I please have an apple? And I would say, may I please have an apple? And she would say, no. That was it. So, you know, it was her apples and I said it incorrectly. And what this did to me really is all day long, every day of my life, in my mind, I'm correcting people's grammar. It drives me crazy. And I think, can't you hear how wrong this is? And of course, they can hear how wrong it was because they didn't have my mother saying to them like 24 hours a day, nay, you know, no, we, not you, not the. I mean, so that this was very, very important. My parents were both first generation Americans. And I think that it was very important to them to be as absolutely American as possible. and is absolutely conventionally behaved as possible.
Fran, taken a lot of your time. I'm really grateful to you doing this. I appreciate this is a very unnatural way to talk to another human being through a screen, perhaps especially so for you. So thank you for this series and for talking with us today.
You're welcome.